Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. We're here talking about inner work and your inner life, and we're here to support you on your journey of finding your beautiful life. And now we are in the month of March of 2024, Laurel. Welcome to March.
Time flies with you, Laurel.
I know it flies, and especially when we're having fun, which we do on the podcast. I don't know if you can tell, but Laurel and I love to talk about our coaching work. We love to share this kind of information with the world. We love to talk about it. So we're having a good time when we're here on the podcast because we feel like we're giving you some really great stuff. Yeah.
And on a Monday, what better way, right?
No.
Mondays can have kind of I don't know. We have our own opinions about Mondays, but bringing the podcast on a Monday really helps me start the week off.
Yeah, yeah. And hopefully can set a tone, for the week of exploration for everybody. I feel like that was one of the goals of the podcast was to give you some good content to focus on and to challenge yourself to up level, your experience and how you
Yeah.
want to show up in the world. And Monday's a great day to tune in. And if you can't tune on Mondays, any day is a great day. So don't count yourself out if you're not here on a Monday. We're here with you every day.
We are.
Yeah. So here we are in March and we're starting a month of communication and we've got some really great topics. This is I said to Laurel before we jumped on the podcast, Laurel, you might have a hard time shutting me up because I love this topic and I have so much that I would want to share. And so we really trying to keep it a little bit contained on our focuses of the week. And this week we're going to talk about handling difficult conversations because we feel like that in communication, sometimes that's one of the most difficult and challenging places that we can find ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also is one of the areas I think about that has people feeling like they don't communicate well, right?
Right.
Like like one difficult conversation can really have you second guessing your communication capabilities when I think that, you know, it's not always difficult communication or difficult conversations isn't indicative of our communication skills
Hmm.
in a whole or in the whole
Yeah.
that this is an area that especially if you're someone that avoids difficult conversations, we never have the opportunity to build that skill.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that talked about how it can really, kind of a bad conversation, right? Or a difficult conversation where you don't feel like you showed up well, can really give you a hit to your self-esteem or the way you feel,
Yes.
about yourself in that
Yeah,
moment. And
it
then
can.
even afterwards for a while. So really important to I think if you're going to have really rich relationships that you feel good about and that you feel like bring a lot of light and richness to your life, then you have to work on your communication. I just feel like it's essential to all of us, don't you, Laurel?
Yes.
I think you
I
can't really not go there. Yeah.
and yeah, and even though it's uncomfortable when you're first learning these skills,
Mhm.
that after when you're at that point where you notice your skills are better,
Yeah.
then it does feel good,
Yeah.
right? Or when a difficult conversation has to be had, you don't go in, at least I don't go into it with as much trepidation as I used to, right?
Same
I
here.
know I can manage through it differently than I have in the past.
Yes, yes. So, handling difficult conversations, I'm going to just share right from the get-go. The first book that I read that really helped me was called Difficult Conversations. And I'm going to put a link to that in our show notes so everybody can take a look at that. I think it was written by, there's like a four author title on it, and it might have been like a research group at a university that put the book together. But I loved the book, and I actually created a little template from it that I used a lot with my counseling and my counseling days and with my coaching clients. And I remember it still, to this day because I used it and I know other people have used it and found it really helpful. So I feel like we could even start there, Laurel, if you want to, where I'll
I'd
just
love to
share
hear
that.
about that.
Yeah, yeah. So uh let me do it in a nutshell. If you got a pen and paper, this will be helpful to you now. If you don't, you might want to just pause and come back with your pen and paper. And I'm going to give you this is really short and sweet, and it works. It works really well. And once you get good at it, you don't have to think about it as much, and you can deepen your own, work around communication just by using this simple little template. Okay, so let's take an example where you're with somebody and you're in a repeated pattern where they do or they say something and you're having a hard time talking about it and you don't know how to proceed in a way that might be useful and potentially be productive to your experience. So the beginning is uh, when you, and now you want to be very specific. So now here's you're going to fill in the blanks. So you're going to write down when you, and now you're going to fill in the blanks. So when you say to the other person, let's say, I'll use an example of when we're going to keep it simple, Laurel, and I'm going to come back to the tidiness thing because that's the easy thing for me. When you leave a big mess on the counter and you don't clean up after yourself, I feel now here's the next part. So I'm specific about the behavior. So when you, and now I'm specific, leave a big mess on the counter and don't clean up after yourself. The next part is I feel. And now you're going to fill in the blank. I feel. And for me, it would be I feel like you don't care about me and how I like the house to be kept. Okay. I feel disrespected. I feel like you don't even really acknowledge that I live here. Okay. So it's talking about feeling how it makes me feel. Okay. So you're owning that and you're being specific about what it is, the thing that's happening that's hard for you. Okay. So we're in a place where we can actually talk about something in some detail. Okay. So the next part is when next time when could you please, and ask for exactly what you want. Okay. Next time when you're in the kitchen making your lunch, could you please just wipe off the counter and put everything away? And I will, and offer something else up. Okay. So, and I will make sure that I let you know that I really appreciate that. And I will make sure that I do the same every time I'm in the kitchen. So you don't come in to a dirty kitchen as well. Right. So you're offering up some sort of agreement that now will change the scenario. Right.
Yeah.
And then you say, how does that feel for you? Is that something that we could do together? Like you invite them into the conversation to communicate the issue. And you're also being specific
Yeah.
about so
And
many things. Yeah.
I like that, especially the looking for the agreement at the end of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we stop before that,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we
Yeah.
just say, next time, could you please, and I will,
Yeah.
and walk away, we don't necessarily, we can assume they're in agreement, but we don't know.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
the next time might come and it might not happen the way you thought, right?
Right, right. And it's really about the conversation. It's not only about addressing the issue, but it's about having productive conversation.
And and having both parties engaged in the conversation. I mean,
Right.
often I find when difficult conversations come up and they include conflict,
Mm-hmm.
if the let's just assume it's two people, it's probably easier. I don't know if it's easier with two or three or four,
Yeah.
but two people,
Yeah.
you know, if if it is not a skill set of both, sometimes what happens is someone shuts down.
Yeah.
One person says what they need to say, the other person hears that or experiences it, but there's no resolution,
Right.
right? Which means that the next time that topic comes up, it's going to be a conflict again,
Right. And
right?
usually a
And
repeat, right, of the
repeat,
same.
yep.
Yeah.
And it becomes unresolved over a longer period of time, which is not a healthy way to communicate,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So I really like that. I mean, I did take my pen and my paper while you were leading us through that. And, it really is important um, that you're expressing your feelings about
Right.
a situation, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
like that when you say, when you XYZ,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? It's not about the person. It's not you are a
Right.
slob.
Right. Right.
It's
Exactly.
when you leave the kitchen a mess, I feel this way,
Yes, yes,
right?
exactly. And it's like owning too, right? This is a thing for me, right? And it's something
Hmm.
that you might be doing, but I'm owning that it's an issue for me, right? Not that it's your problem, but that it's a problem for me. And this is why it's a problem for me or why I don't like it, right? And the one thing I love about this, well, one of the many things I love about this communication template is, when I said you can use it to help you get good at all kinds of communication going forward, is if you find yourself in patterns with people, and this is generally what happens in relationships, right? Is we repeat the same kind of communication foibles over
Yeah.
and over again, right? We get stuck in these same loops with people because we're just doing the only thing we know generally. And so what you can do now is you can also, if you're in a pattern with somebody and you can tell you're doing something that's bothering them, but you're not talking about it productively, you can also do the thing where you go, I think I'm doing something that might be making you feel badly or feel you seem a little upset, right? You can use it as a teaser to begin the conversation and hopefully open to explore it, right? And talk about it in a way where you're acknowledging, I think I'm just doing something. I don't really know what it is I'm doing. So can you help me out here? Can we
Yeah.
get enlightened about what our tension is about, so to speak. Yeah.
And I think that having a few practices like this,
Hmm.
right? I mean, this one, I think about, I mean, my head right away went to a more frequent interaction in a close relationship, right? But when you learn to communicate this way, even in relationships that aren't um, as close,
Hmm.
right? It might be, I mean, we talk about this a lot in the world we live in where a lot of people don't communicate well, especially with people that are different than them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how can you bring some of this practice of listening, right? Getting agreement where you can agree, expressing how something makes you feel,
Yeah.
right? Because let's face it, we are all entitled to feeling a way we do because of a situation,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't put blame on the other person for their part in the situation. It just expresses how we feel,
Beautiful.
right? And so I do think about this like often we think we need to improve our communication for our very close relationships to make them better. But I think what I'm suggesting is that just by practicing better communication, what if we could make all of our interaction with other humans better?
Yes. I found that. I feel like I found that, Laurel. I think that, if I had to reflect back on my life, and I don't know, of course, this is a very subjective view, right? I'm not outside myself to be able to say this, with any kind of accuracy necessarily. But in my opinion of myself, I would say that early on, I wasn't really very good at relationships. I wanted them really badly, and I wanted to have really good ones really badly. But I don't think I knew how to communicate really well because I was too afraid of saying the wrong thing. I didn't know how to express my feelings well. I was worried about getting hurt. Like there was a lot as a sensitive person that got in my way of just being, I think, good in relationships because my communication was a little faulty. And to grow in that way, has for me has just been so huge because I have these really wonderful relationships now. And I think, I think I communicate well most of the time. I'm not perfect. I know that for sure. But I try and I want to, and I think that that's a big deal.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought that up. Because you gave a list of reasons that you think that you may not have been good at communication or at relationships, right?
Yeah.
But I want to add to that that most of us don't have good role models
Yeah.
who model good communication,
Yeah.
right? And let's go even into so many people aren't comfortable expressing their feelings, and it that may really be influenced by if you grew up in a place where it was safe to express your feelings, or if feelings were not safe to be had, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
when you start to think about kind of a lifetime of learning communication skills based on our environment, or maybe, it might be within a classroom, it might be within a family structure, it might be in a neighborhood, who knows? But we learn from the organizations that we are a part of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so we learn those lessons and we carry them into adulthood.
Yeah.
So I'm going to encourage our listeners to really do an inventory of who who do you have in your life that are good communicators that you can look to as a mentor or a role model, right? Like what resources do you have to learn this new skill or to even practice? I mean, let's face it, practicing difficult communication or conflict communication, right? It's not something we want to jump into to practice. Like, oh, please cause an argument so I can
Yeah.
practice here.
That's right. Yeah.
But, there is a skill to be learned. I know when I
Absolutely.
was in corporate communications, one of the early trainings I had was on conflict communication,
Mm,
because I was in a very public role where there was conflict between the company I worked for and represented and the public.
yeah.
I needed to learn those skills, right? A lot of it was the listening, right?
Mhm.
A lot of it was being able to communicate in a way that wasn't fault finding,
Right.
right? It wasn't blaming.
Yeah.
It was really just communicating, my feelings, my situation, my circumstances, my opinion,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
also respecting the other person enough to hear where they're coming from and what they're bringing into the communication.
Yeah, so I love that, Laurel. I feel like, if you're there with pen and paper, a couple notes there. One is, becoming a really good listener, right? So that was one of the things that you just said, which is really essential, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then the other one is the not fault finding,
Yeah.
not going in with this is somebody's fault, but where are you and where am I and where do we want to get to? Right. And where do
Yeah.
you want to get to? Where do I want to get to? And how might we get there together? Right. Is kind of the approach rather than, we can look backwards and learn from things, certainly, but just the fault finding never seems to be productive in the end, does
No.
it? Yeah.
No, and I think the fault finding, at least in my experience, brings us to a place where we're looking to convince the other person that our way is the right way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But even going back to the example, the recipe that you gave, right?
Yeah.
At the end, when you're asking, how does that make you feel? You know,
Yeah.
is that something that we can do together, right?
Yeah.
You're
Right.
asking for the solution, the collective solution, and even maybe a compromise, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because in some things, maybe you're not looking for a compromise. I mean, if I were to say to you, every third time I make myself lunch, I'll clean up after myself, that might not
Mhm.
be enough for you.
Right, right. And it might be, yeah, and it might be that, as I listen to you, I realize, when you come in at lunchtime, you don't have enough time to actually make your lunch and clean up. So that might not be the answer. The answer might be, oh, let's get in the habit of making lunch ahead of time and we'll have them in the refrigerator ready for us and people won't be making a mess that can't get clean. It's like, again, it's all about the communication and the problem solving experience together, right?
And the awareness. And this is
Yeah.
what, I find this happens, the awareness of someone, you know, going back to two people, I may have a different timeline of expectation than the other, right? Maybe they don't have time to clean up during a short lunch break. Maybe they prefer to do all their tidying up, you know, in a single 20-minute span at the
Yeah.
end of the day,
Right.
right? Where, you know, I mean, I am one of those people that if you leave a cup on the counter, it's gone before you turn your back, right? You know, you might go to the bathroom and come back and your coffee is in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
But so my timeline might be different than someone else's. And
Yeah.
so starting to bring awareness to, you know, um, what I need, want, feel, and what another person need, wants, and feels, right? Just
Yeah.
bringing that awareness helps come to a solution sooner.
So powerful. So powerful.
Yeah.
I am the other thing I'm thinking about, I want to touch on two other things before we have to jump off. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, Laurel, but one is just kind of circling back to our retreat and the idea of coming into a group process where you have agreements and guidelines that you follow. And a lot of them have to do around listening and communicating in the process. And the model that we use, for me was one where when I learned it, I took those agreements and those guidelines into my everyday life and I started practicing them. And I owe a lot of my ability to communicate well and my strength of my relationships. I owe it a lot to those guidelines. I do really feel like the guidelines, like no advice giving, a lot of times you can walk down the street and people are going to start telling you what to do, and they don't even know you. They don't even know necessarily your whole story. But if they think you got a problem, they've got some advice for you. And really, ultimately, we have our best advice within. We know what would really work for us. And if we don't know, it's up to us to find out through experimentation, really. Right.
Yeah.
And so we can hear advice, it might have its place, but ultimately to really support other people, it's helping other people find their own best advice. And that's one of the agreements, that we use in these circles and in this model. And for me, it's the one I took into my life where I'm like, I don't have your answer. I mean, as a coach, I'm not, I can offer you a strategy. I can tell you what I did. I can, whatever, but I know, ultimately somewhere in there, what is the right answer for you? Let's find it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when we used those group agreements in our summer book circles, and it was the first time I had been introduced to that group agreement and the process. I loved that, right? Because when you think about just how we learn to communicate and how we engage from a very young age, um, it just reminds me of often we are preparing our piece of the conversation while someone else is still talking, right? We are we're in conversation or in communication to respond to others.
Right.
Where when you practice and are in a group setting where your only job is to listen fully to the person speaking because there's no reason, there's no room for response to what they just said. It changes the way that you listen, and it really does make me think that communication in that way is so much richer, so much deeper, so much more meaningful. And there's less opportunity for misunderstandings when we are really deeply listening to another.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I just want to reiterate it's early March when this is airing. If there's room left at the retreat, the link will be here under the show in the show notes. So you can take a look and um consider coming and joining us in our circle and having a hopefully a really beautiful weekend with us where you're building and helping to create your own beautiful life. That's what the retreat is all about. And we're here to help you support you in finding and creating your own beautiful life, which is,
Yeah.
the
And
goal
and
here.
if
Yeah.
if you do go to that link and you find that it is sold out, shoot us a note, get in touch with us.
Yeah.
Just we will keep you in mind for the next time
Yeah.
we offer a retreat. April will
Yeah.
not be our first and last, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And we'll make sure that we reach out to you ahead of time so you know. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right,
So
Laurel.
Laurel, I feel like I think our challenge to everybody is to go out there and have a difficult conversation this week and use the template. Give it a try, give it a go, or
Yes,
or some variation that feels right to you of it, right? Just but challenge yourself to get in there and do it a little differently. Don't repeat a same pattern because, you know, it doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. Yeah, and it
it
feels good
it
to change it. Even a little it feels good. Yeah.
it does. Right?
Yeah.
It will be a big boost for your self-esteem and your skill building.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are a regular listener to here at the podcast, could you please take a moment and just leave us a comment, leave us a rating, because that really helps to get the podcast out in the world and get noticed a little bit more. We would really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Off we go, Laurel. I'll see you next time.
Looking forward to it already. Bye.
Bye for now.